everyone, welcome to our session on business research methods. Today we will cover Chapter 7, which focuses on the process of selecting samples. We will be exploring how to choose the appropriate sampling techniques for a variety of research scenarios. Whether you are studying consumer behavior or organizational culture, understanding sampling is the foundation of high-quality data collection and analysis. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to clearly understand the need for sampling and the key concepts associated with it. We will learn to distinguish between probability and non-probability sampling, which is a fundamental division in research design. More importantly, you will learn to identify which specific technique is appropriate for your research goals and apply these decisions to your own MBA research projects. So, what exactly is sampling? According to your textbook, sampling involves selecting a subset or a sample of a population to represent the whole population. Let's understand this with more examples. Look at the diagram on this slide. We start with the overall population, which is the total set of all possible cases. For instance, if we're talking about the market for running shoes, the overall population would be every single person in the world who could potentially buy running shoes. That's a huge number. From there, we identify the target population, which is the actual focus of our inquiry. Going back to the running shoe example, the target population might be young adults aged 18 to 30 who are into fitness and regularly participate in running events. This is a more specific group that our research is aimed at. Finally, we extract the sample, which is the specific subset we will study. For example, a marketing researcher cannot study every single person in the target population of young, fitness-oriented runners. Instead, they might select a specific group of members from a local running club. Just like a marketing researcher can't study every single smartphone user in the world, they might select a specific group of students using smartphones at one university to represent their findings. Another example could be a food company that wants to test a new energy bar. The overall population is all consumers, the target population is athletes and active individuals, and the sample could be a group of athletes from a particular sports team. Why do we need to sample in the first place? Simply put, studying an entire population is often impractical or far too costly. Sampling makes data collection manageable and focused. It allows us to perform statistical inference, where we make generalizations about a large group based on a smaller representative sample. This approach enables researchers to draw valid conclusions efficiently, providing reliable and accurate data without the need for an exhaustive census. Consider Nitra Industries. Instead of surveying all 15,000 clients, a researcher can select a representative sample of 400 to get a very clear picture of customer satisfaction level. Sampling techniques are generally divided into two main categories: probability and non-probability sampling. In probability sampling, every case in the population has a known and often equal chance of being selected. This makes it ideal for quantitative research where you want to represent the whole group. For example, if a researcher wants to study the average income of all employees in a large company with 5,000 employees, they could use simple random sampling. They assign a number to each of the 5,000 employees and then use a random number generator to select a sample of, say, 500 employees. Since each employee has an equal chance of being selected, the sample is likely to be representative of the entire employee population, allowing for valid quantitative inferences about the average income. Conversely, in non-probability sampling, the probability of selection is unknown. This makes it better suited for qualitative research, where you are building theory rather than generalizing. For instance, if a researcher is exploring the experiences of entrepreneurs in a new startup ecosystem, they might use purposive sampling. They specifically select entrepreneurs who have unique stories, such as those who have overcome significant challenges or have innovative business models. Since the selection is based on specific criteria rather than random chance, the probability of any particular entrepreneur being selected is not known. These two categories will guide every decision you make regarding your research design and the tools you use for analysis later in your MBA project journey. An important step in sampling is identifying your sampling frame. This is a complete list of everyone or everything you want to study within your population of interest. To understand this better, let's say you're researching the reading habits of university students. The general population here is all university students, but your sampling frame could be a list of students from a particular university, which is much more specific. It's like having a student telephone directory. For instance, if you're conducting a study on a specific university campus, this directory can serve as your sampling frame listing every student in that university. Another example could be if you're researching the financial performance of companies. The population might be all companies in a certain industry, but the sampling frame could be a list of companies on a stock exchange. The size of your sample is also vital. It is governed by the confidence level you need, the margin of error you can tolerate, and the types of analysis you plan to perform. For example, if you want to be 95% confident in your results and can tolerate a 5% margin of error, you'll need to calculate an appropriate sample size. Let's say you're using statistical analysis to draw conclusions about your data. Different types of analysis like regression analysis or chi, he, square tests may require different sample sizes. For your MBA projects, you must define and justify your target population and sampling frame very clearly to ensure validity. For example, if your project is about the market share of mobile phone brands among young consumers, you need to clearly state that your target population is young consumers and your sampling frame could be a list of subscribers from a particular mobile network that has a large number of young users. This way, you can ensure that your research is based on a solid foundation and your results are valid. Let us talk about response rates. A perfect representative sample exactly mirrors the target population. For example, if you're researching the eating habits of a town's residents, a perfect sample would have the same age, gender, and income distribution as the entire town. However, in reality, we often face non-response. There are 4 levels we report. First, complete refusal, where no questions are answered. Imagine you're conducting a survey on people's exercise habits door to door. Some people might simply slam the door in your face and not answer any of your questions. Second, break off, where less than half are answered. Say you're surveying students about their study methods over the phone. A student might start answering but then get interrupted by a class and end the call, answering less than half of the questions. Third, partial response, between 50 and 80%. For instance, in an online survey about consumer preferences for a new product, a respondent might fill out most of the form but skip some optional questions, giving a partial response. And finally, complete response, where over 80% of the questions are answered. In a mail-in survey about local tourism, a tourist who fills out almost all the questions about their experiences in the area provides a complete response. Achieving a high response rate is essential because it minimizes bias. If only a certain type of person responds, your sample no longer represents the whole population, which can lead to errors in your final research conclusions. For example, if your survey on a new fitness program is only answered by people who are already very fit, your results won't accurately represent how the general population would respond to the program. Now, let us focus on probability sampling. This sampling method is most commonly associated with survey research strategies. For example, in a large scale public opinion survey about a new government policy, probability sampling can be used to gather data. Here, The goal is to make inferences about a population to answer your research questions. Suppose a researcher wants to know how the general public in a city feels about a proposed tax increase. By using probability sampling, they can draw conclusions about the entire population based on the sample. It is best for quantitative studies where you are testing a theory or a hypothesis. For instance, a psychologist might use probability sampling to test the hypothesis that students who study with music in the background perform differently on exams. This method supports statistical inference but requires a solid sampling frame. In the case of the public opinion survey, the sampling frame could be the list of all registered voters in the city. While it ensures representativeness, keep in mind it can be more expensive and time-consuming. For example, if you are conducting a national survey using probability sampling, you may need to travel to different locations to reach the selected sample, which incurs costs and takes time. The process involves 4 stages. First, identifying the frame. In a study about the health habits of employees in a large corporation, the frame would be the list of all employees. Second, deciding on sample size. If you want to have a reliable result about the employees' health habits, you need to calculate an appropriate sample size. For example, if there are 10,000 employees, you might decide to sample 500 of them. Third, selecting the specific technique. You could choose simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, or other methods depending on the situation. Finally, checking that the resulting sample is truly representative of the target population you intended to study. In the employee health study, you would need to ensure that the sample includes employees from different departments, age groups, and genders to accurately represent the whole employee population. Let us explore the core probability techniques. Simple random sampling is like a fair lottery. It involves selecting cases via random numbers. For example, imagine you're a researcher studying employee satisfaction in a large company. There are 2,500 employees in total, and you want to get a sample. You could use a random number generator to pick 250 employees from the list of 2,500. This way, every employee has an equal chance of being selected. Systematic random sampling is another useful method. It selects every nth case after a random starting point. Let's say you're a market researcher studying client preferences. You have a list of clients and you decide to choose every 10th client. First, you randomly pick a starting point like the 3rd client on the list. Then you select every 10th client after that, so the 13th, 23rd, 33rd, and so on. This method is efficient and can provide a good sample. Stratified random sampling is more sophisticated. It divides the population into strata, such as departments in a company. Suppose you're researching the performance of different departments in a business. You divide the employees into departments like sales, marketing, and finance. Then, within each department, you take a sample. This ensures balanced representation. For instance, if the sales department has 500 employees, the marketing department has 300, and the finance department has 200, you would take samples proportionally from each department to accurately represent the whole company. Cluster sampling divides the population into naturally occurring groups. Consider a retail chain with multiple branches. Each branch is a cluster. Instead of sampling individual customers from all over the chain, you can select whole clusters to survey. For example, if the chain has 50 branches across the country, you might randomly select 5 branches and survey all the customers in those 5 branches. This is useful when it's difficult or costly to access individual cases. Finally, multi-stage sampling involves several stages. Let's say you're conducting a national survey. First, you start with broad regions, like different states in a country. Then you move down to districts within those states. And finally, you end up with households. For example, you first randomly select 5 states, then within those states you select 3 districts each. And from those districts, you select specific households to survey. These methods are essential for quantitative research, where you need to make statistical generalizations about your target population accurately. Choosing the right probability technique depends on several factors. First is the availability of a sampling frame. A sampling frame is a list of all the elements in the population you want to study. For example, if you're researching students in a school, the sampling frame would be the school student roster. If you don't have such a list, some methods like simple random sampling, which requires a complete list to assign random numbers, become impossible. Second is the nature of your data and the required accuracy. You need to think about whether you need high-level statistical inference. For instance, if you're conducting a medical study to test the effectiveness of a new drug, you'll need a high level of accuracy and statistical inference. You'll want a technique that can provide precise results, like stratified random sampling. This way, you can ensure that different subgroups within the population, such as different age groups or genders, are represented accurately. Third is the geographical distribution of your cases. Are they spread across the country or concentrated in one city? Suppose you're studying the shopping habits of consumers. If your cases are spread across the country, a multi-stage sampling method might be appropriate. You could first select regions, then cities within those regions, and finally specific stores or consumers. On the other hand, if your cases are concentrated in one city, you might use a simpler method like systematic random sampling. Finally, you must consider cost and time constraints, along with the presence of natural clusters or strata within the population. For example, if you're on a tight budget and short on time, cluster sampling could be a good option. Let's say you're researching farmers in a large agricultural area. The farms are naturally grouped into clusters based on geographical location. Instead of trying to sample individual farmers from all over the area, you can randomly select a few clusters and survey all the farmers within those clusters. Weighing these factors will help you select the most efficient method that still maintains the integrity of your research data. Table 7.2 in your textbook provides a great summary of how these factors impact your choice. For instance, while simple random sampling is conceptually simple and unbiased, it has a high relative cost if the population is large. Systematic sampling is lower in cost and easier to explain but requires a non-periodic frame. Stratified sampling offers better comparison across different groups but can be more complex to execute. As you go through this table briefly, notice how the geographical area and the size of the sample needed can drastically change which technique is considered the most suitable for your specific research budget and timeline. To reinforce this, look at these additional examples. If you need an unbiased, simple concept and have a high budget, simple random is your go-to. If you need to ensure representation across different segments, stratified is best because it guarantees each stratum is included. If your population is dispersed over a wide area, multi-stage sampling is the most efficient choice despite its complexity. For your revisions, focus on these advantages. Understanding why you would choose cluster over stratified, for example, is a common exam topic and a practical skill you will need when designing the methodology section of your MBA dissertation or project. Moving on to non-probability sampling. This is used when the probability of each case being selected is not known. It is most frequently used for exploratory and qualitative research, such as case studies or theory building. It is also the practical choice for situations where access to a full population list is limited or the target population is unclear. In these scenarios, we are not looking to make broad statistical generalizations. Instead, we are looking for deep insights, high credibility, and a better understanding of a specific phenomenon within a particular context. It is about the quality and depth of the data. Let's look deeper and examine the non-probability techniques in more detail. First up is quota sampling. This method involves dividing the population into specific groups and then collecting data from a set number of individuals in each group. For example, a market researcher might be interested in understanding consumer preferences at a large department store. To get a well-rounded view, they decide to divide the population into men and women and survey 50 men and 50 women. This way, they can ensure that they're getting feedback from both genders equally. Next is purposive sampling. In purposive sampling, you select cases that are most relevant to your research question. Suppose you're conducting a leadership study. You want to understand the strategies and experiences of successful leaders. In this case, you'd specifically choose to interview experienced managers. These managers have been in leadership positions for a long time, so they can offer in-depth insights and practical advice based on their real-world experiences. Now, let's talk about volunteer sampling, which includes snowball sampling and selfie selection. In snowball sampling, participants refer other potential participants to the study. For instance, if you're researching a rare hobby like underwater basket weaving, it can be difficult to find participants. You might start by interviewing one underwater basket weaver. This person then refers you to their friends who also share the same hobby, and those friends refer more people. This way, your sample grows like a snowball. Self-selection is when individuals volunteer to participate in a study via a given link. Maybe a psychology student is researching stress levels among online gamers. They post a link to their survey on gaming forums. Gamers who are interested and willing to share their experiences click on the link and participate in the study on their own accord. Finally, there's haphazard or convenience sampling. This involves picking the easiest cases to obtain. Imagine you're a student doing a quick study on shopper behavior. The nearest and most convenient place to collect data might be a local mall. You simply approach shoppers as they walk by and ask them to answer a few questions. It's quick and easy. However, it's important to note that while these non-probability sampling methods are convenient, they require strong justification regarding their credibility. Since they are not random samples, they cannot be used for statistical generalization. When choosing a non-probability technique, your choice depends on ease of access, your research purpose, and the importance of credibility. Unlike probability methods, these often require a strong justification for why the chosen sample is credible. Look at the flowchart in Figure 7.5. It asks, is your purpose exploratory or explanatory? Are individual cases difficult to identify? If your focus is on unusual or extreme cases, you might choose extreme case purposive sampling. If you are looking for key themes across a diverse group, heterogeneous purposive sampling is better. This logic ensures that your sampling strategy aligns perfectly with your research objectives. Table 7.6 provides a brief overview of the impact of various factors on non-probability choices. Notice that the likelihood of a sample being representative is generally low across these techniques, except for quota sampling, which can be moderate. The relative costs are mostly reasonable, but the control over sample contents varies. For example, purposive techniques give the researcher high control over who is included, while snowball sampling relies on the participants' networks. Use this table as a quick reference when you need to justify why a specific non-probability method is the most feasible for your qualitative study or your pilot project. Here is a quick summary for your revisions. Quota sampling is your best bet when you know the characteristics of a population but lack a full list. Purposive sampling is essential when you need specific expertise. Snowball sampling is the standard for hidden or hard-to-reach populations, such as niche professional groups. Self-selection is used when voluntary responses are acceptable, and convenience sampling is strictly for exploratory or pilot studies where speed is more important than representativeness. Understanding when to use each is key to mastering this chapter. Take a moment to think about which of these might apply to your current research interests. Our case study today features Andrew, an MBA student investigating economic inactivity among Maltese female homemakers. Eurostat data revealed that Malta had the highest rate of inactive women in the EU, mostly homemakers. Andrew defined his target population as individuals who were neither employed nor unemployed, specifically those not actively seeking work. To ensure statistical precision, he calculated a minimum sample size of 383 based on a total population of 63,000, aiming for a 95% confidence level. He initially planned for simple random sampling but faced a significant hurdle: data privacy. He could not access the census database directly. Instead, his company acted as an intermediary, randomly selecting 400 participants to manage the process ethically while protecting participant confidentiality and maintaining the study's validity. Let us look at the case questions. Andrew was motivated by the high rates of economic inactivity and wanted to suggest policies to help women enter the labor market. His target population was specifically those economically inactive, which includes students and homemakers. He initially intended to use probability sampling to ensure each homemaker had an equal chance of selection, allowing for statistical generalization. However, he could not apply simple random sampling directly because of data privacy concerns regarding the census database. This is a classic example of how ethical and legal limitations in the real world can force a researcher to adapt their sampling strategy. Andrew ensured precision by calculating a statistically significant sample size and selecting 400 participants to account for potential non-response. The ethical issue of data privacy was resolved by using his company as an intermediary. The big lesson here is the importance of balancing statistical precision with ethical considerations and managing non-response bias through random replacement. By doing this, Andrew enhanced both the internal validity of his results and the external validity, meaning his findings could be applied to the wider population of Maltese homemakers. This shows how careful planning can overcome practical obstacles in research to provide truly valuable academic and social insights. To wrap up, here are the key takeaways for your exams. Remember that sampling saves time and cost while maintaining accuracy if done correctly. Probability sampling supports generalization, while non-probability is for building theory. You must always justify your choice of technique based on your specific research question and objectives. For your exam preparation, I strongly recommend reviewing figures 7.2, 7.3, and 7.5, along with tables 7.2 and 7.6. These contain the core logic you will be tested on. Thank you for your attention today, and I look forward to seeing how you apply these sampling techniques to your own upcoming MBA projects.